We're not sure. Okay, is this Mike from around the world?
Yes, it is, Pastor Paul. How's the volume?
Perfect. Good,
Okay, good.
strong,
Good.
very good, very good. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good so far.
So far, that's good. Well, Mike,
Yeah, well, interesting feedback from data.
okay.
You're not going to believe where it led me, but we'll discuss that later.
All right.
I'll give you a circle of where this data led me. And boy, it's one big circle.
Well, Mike, okay, so the data you're going to share, for those of you who are just joining us tonight, this is Mike from around the world. We've been talking with him probably for 5 years, on and off. He's given us great information and told us 5 years ago, at least 4.5 years ago, that there was 5 waves of energy that were going to affect the entire universe, all the planets, the sun, and especially the earth. And he told us to watch for volcanic eruptions, strong volcanism, watch for increase in earthquakes, straight line winds, extreme weather conditions, sinkholes, thunderbolts of lightning with charged particles, making them the static extremely more deadly. Watch for earthquakes, tsunamis, cyclones, typhoons, everything to increase. And even today, folks, we had a volcano eruption, Mount Fuego in Guatemala, I believe it is. I don't have my notes in front of me. And then we also, Mike, just as we were coming on the air, we've had a mega earthquake, 6.8, just hit up there in the north. I think that's called the North Atlantic Ocean. It's right over there in what's called Jan Mayen, just off the coast of Greenland, way up there. A 6.8, which that's the weird place to have an earthquake that big. That's huge and very shallow. And that happened 2 minutes before we came on the air, just in time, I guess, for the waves of energy. So, Mike, help us out. What's going on? What's the information from this? From what last week we talked about, that the third wave of the 5 waves of energy was going to potentially start affecting this planet starting tomorrow, November 9th through the 12th. What have you got to tell us tonight on this?
Well, some of the data that's coming back is they're picking up these secondary particles coming in, galactic cosmic rays. I know that sounds strange for some folks, but I want to give you a history of something real quick so we can have this in context so that people understand what I'm talking about here. Galactic cosmic rays, or cosmic rays, they come into the planet. They bombard the atmosphere all the time, okay? There's been a missing link in studying the effects of galactic cosmic rays with the atmosphere, right? Now, believe it or not, this goes back to the 50s. And somewhat like a bloodhound, I have been looking into these things. Right now, we have an influx, a higher percentage of an influx of particles coming in, and they're really pouring in, and they're at a buildup. Every time one of these pulses came through, more and more cosmic rays are also coming through. They're coming in to our atmosphere, and the Earth is being bombarded with them. This has a health effect, biological effect, geological effect, and a type of burning effect on the skin. It's also affecting the sun. Now, just in case, these rays are coming in, but I want to discuss this with you, Pastor Paul. Do you not know somebody else, especially since the last 2 years, has been heavily investigating galactic cosmic rays coming into the Earth? Guess who it is?
Wow. Well, I mean, normally you would say NASA and the European Space Station people, but could it be someone else, like maybe an activist or somebody out there?
CERN.
What?
Everybody's familiar with the name CERN.
What?
CERN is in overdrive, trying to figure something out very fast. Here's the situation that we're in right now. The galactic cosmic rays are 100% affecting our weather. They are responsible. They are affecting this weather. Now, I couldn't just say that before because I needed some data, right? And
Okay.
I needed some insight into a few things to see which way this would go. It couldn't be one of those subjects who actually warn anybody about and say, well, it's here today, but it might go away in 2 weeks. This won't go away. And CERN right now is actively investigating the effect of aerosols in the atmosphere as affected by cosmic rays, of course, which are responsible for cloud formation. You can't have cloud formation without certain aerosols. These aerosols put off gases, causing a greater ADL rating or cloud formation in the sky, which means moisture retention of the atmosphere is at an all-time high. That is a very uncommon term. Also, pressure in the stratosphere is altering very fast, faster now this year, at the end of this year, up until this very point, than anybody has ever seen that before in terms of these optical measurements and so on and so forth.
Well, why would CERN, CERN has been so concerned about colliding protons at the speed of light to find the God particle or maybe the ghost particle or whatever particle they're trying to find? How long have they been studying galactic cosmic rays, and why?
Well, back in the 30s, right, when they first detected or collected an antimatter, which was a positron, which is an anti-electron, they continued discovering particles coming from galactic cosmic rays coming into the atmosphere. Now, this is a bigger deal than what most people think. See, right now they're flooding the internet, they're flooding everything, all these scientific journals, with a bunch of jargon of things, nice little fantastic discoveries. But the problem is they have been trying to nail down the effect of galactic cosmic rays in Earth's atmosphere because they knew this continuation of influx of these cosmic rays would increase. But they did not have the data concerning the effect of these high-speed particles and highly charged particles affecting our atmosphere by way of aerosols. They didn't have that. And so it took them to make a device in CERN. And in this device, they can replicate the atmosphere without contamination. They also have the particle accelerator in which they do collect information from when something hits these aerosols. Of course, they do it for more than one reason, but this is a primary reason because you're dealing with, they have to have this large equipment not only to do what, because people can read about CERN all the time, right? But I'm not talking about some of those projects. This is something specific to an interest that I have, something that I was warned about back in the 80s. And so from 1932, going on to 54, 55, when it was founded, CERN was founded, it was formed on the premise, right, of cosmic ray, this cosmic ray finding or collection of data to find out what the effects are on the atmosphere. Because they knew back then we were headed for a very rough time. They didn't know how. And what they were doing was they collected all this geological information and all these, they went to every place they could possibly go to. And what they were after was the effects that it had back in time. Now, because most people cannot decipher archaeological finds,
but
people are more interested in rocks and everything like that. That's not what they were interested in.
But when you say that in the 1950s that CERN was interested in galactic cosmic rays, they knew we were in for a rough time. Is it because they knew that this binary system, this Nibiru or Planet X or Planet Number 9 or whatever we want to call this, or biblical term wormwood, did they know then that this thing was coming? And so they wanted to get ahead of this by trying to understand the pressure, the particles, the chargeable particles that would be in the stratosphere and the atmosphere, the pressured build, and the galactic cosmic rays. They wanted to try to understand its impact upon our planet. Did they know this back in the 50s?
In the 1940s, contrary to popular belief, Germany, with some Russian and French scientists, actually looked deep into space. They were actually picking up these particles back then. But what they found was between 1930, I believe it was 37, to about 1950, 1951 is they found or 1948, they determined that we had a buildup, we had a problem in the atmosphere with radiation coming in. And when I say radiation, I mean galactic cosmic rays. I'm not talking about the sun's radiation. And that was one thing back in the 30s that they actually split. Truth be told, they know a little bit more, right, than what the average person is used to learning. But, yeah, they knew about this problem back then. If the average person would go back and see what Germany was doing, what some of the French scientists with Germany was doing, and what the Russians were doing, they would find out, even during the time where they were developing space-based devices, that they were also doing some more things. Seeing into space was one of the big things that actually began much earlier than that. And so what they did was they built chemical optical devices, right? It is electronic chemical optical device. And they began to pick up something very strange. Now, from that technology back then to today, we deal with a lot of digital technology, right? So if I built a device that said you can't pick up this frequency, I would have no choice but to say, okay. But back then they dealt with analog. And so they had no barriers in what they could achieve. But they've hidden a lot of some of the older TVs and things of that nature. You'd be shocked what a color television from 1980 can pick up all the time. And it's not even encrypted. Anyway, so you have this older technology without the barriers that digital technology has on it, where one company can't control what a person can and can't do. They began to pick up things out there. They saw or were able to observe something extremely dim but extremely bright by way of measuring particles. Brightness is a term used for optical measurements of particles that are coming in space. And so they actually developed this process back then in picking up this. So you have a type of visual, right, by way of particles of space, not by way of the eye, which picks up photons and things, but by way of particles. Now, what they saw was just undeniable, right? It's not something you can stick on a photograph and say, here it is. They had to assimilate this picture from various scales, and then when they put it together, they couldn't believe what they saw. So it was more than what everybody's looking for one thing out there. I can tell you right now, there's more than one thing out there, and some of these things are very dangerous. And the problem is we're moving closer and closer and closer to it. So this portion of the galaxy that we're in is moving closer and closer to something else. Let's put it that way. Just as the moon orbits the Earth, and the Earth orbits the sun, so does this solar system orbit the galaxy. But the galaxy is coming into something else. Something else is coming right into our galaxy.
Okay, so let's
minimal observation from the average person. They can't see this.
Right. Well, because this entity, this is approximately 10 times larger than the planet Earth is itself. Let's say, maybe even larger than that. And so everything has to be being pulled by this. I mean, there's got to be such a powerful gravitational pull affecting everything, the planets, the stars, the sun. And if it affects the sun, it affects all of us. I'm talking about the Earth, the moon, and all the other planets, the asteroids, the meteorites, everything flying through the outer space. So the heavens, like the Bible said, the heavens are going to be shaken, okay? And people are going to react by it. I think that we just saw today. We had the shooting last night, okay? Another shooting, just an insane act. There's been several insane acts in the last few days. Volcanic eruptions, a 6.8 earthquake just hit before we came on the air. Every time we turn around, there's another major shift going on in the planet. And so what you're saying is, Mike, there's information. You're going back into the early 1930s, 40s, 50s, getting your hands around. CERN is involved in the analyzation of everything taking place here. What have we learned? What else have we learned? We can't see it all. There's more things happening than just one. But we talked about the density or the chemical makeup of this wave. What have they been able to find out about this?
Well, most of the particles that come into the atmosphere that actually make it would be an approximation of about one particle per. If you had if you had a watermelon, right, 1 particle per second would pass through that watermelon. That's been pretty much a standard of how much we receive, right, of these charged particles that penetrate through the atmosphere. But it's grown. It is no longer 1 particle per that watermelon per second. It's much more than that. So the count has gone up twice as much as it was since the beginning of the year. I didn't expect that count to be that high. I really didn't expect that count to be that high, because 1 particle going through, if the Earth was covered with watermelons, and 1 particle going through one watermelon, right, per second, is you could say that's passive, right? It's an increase, but it's passive.
Okay.
So imagine that number about maybe 5. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, right? But think of it this way. If a 0.2% change in the Earth's, in the temperature of the stratosphere is enough to send this world into chaos,
Oh, it would.
with surface winds of about, 200 or 300 miles an hour, then that small change in radioactive particles coming in from outer space is a big deal. And by the way, your listeners can actually, if they could, they can go to the CERN site, right? And they can look for a project called CLOUD. It's a device called CLOUD, CLOUD. And if they look at that, it should give them enough information to find out, okay, these guys have been looking into this for a while, okay? But this particle count is increasing, but I didn't expect that. Now, they're
How
having
fast?
issues.
When you say it's increasing, okay, is it increasing exponentially? Is it increasing drastically over the last 12 to 18 months? And is it going to reach some kind of danger level if it continues?
It will reach a danger level. In fact, it'll reach and that's one of the problems. If it continues on this track that it is right now, this trend, right? There's an irreversible time when everything begins to change. And so let me give you an idea.
Can I ask this question? Does everything become flammable? And the reason is, I've been reading a document by a gentleman in the 1950s who studied during the 10 plagues of Egypt. And it wasn't just the plagues of Egypt, that there were all over the world, the same event was happening.
Yes, it was.
And you know this, it affected the Maya.
It was.
So, and this individual says that it's coming back around again. Now, he's dead and gone now, but he wrote this document in the 1950s, but he said it's coming back around again, but it's closer, so the effect is going to be more drastic. So does it, and he kept talking about liquid water, liquid fire flowing on the ground, which the book of Exodus even says that when the hail was mixed with fire, mingled with fire, and it said, and the fire ran up on the ground. So it was a liquid fire, sticky liquid fire. So something like the world hadn't seen really. So I guess my question, Mike, is this changes in the stratosphere and atmosphere? Is it an inflammable nature?
Some of the particles and some of the debris coming in, Pastor Paul, is acidic. It's very acidic. It's full of arsenic. It's also full of nitrogen. It's also full of a type of hydrogen, which is in the presence of helium. Now, most of the particles that are coming in from deep in space, they carry helium with them on the inside, okay? So through a type of collision, that helium can be released, okay? So can the hydrogen and the nitrogen. Now, we all know that's a volatile compound. Water itself can also ignite if you separate the O2 from that nitrogen, correct?
You're right.
Then you have an issue, or hydrogen, then you have an issue, right? So what can do that naturally? Well, I'll tell you what can do that. If a larger body were in the proximity of our solar system, right, you would have an electron pass. They would pass back and forth electrons. Well, that's electricity. And when that actually hits the water, due to the makeup of the Earth, the crust acting as an insulator in certain areas going into the inside the Earth, not here to dispute what's in there, but you would have a type of electrolysis. And if that took place, then that ignitable material, that hydrogen, will float up about 1 centimeter from the surface of the water and ignite. And it would stay that way because it would be electrified, so it would continuously release hydrogen from the water being on fire.
So, I mean, slow it down for my mind here, Mike, because that's what I was reading yesterday, and I was saying, and you just explained it. I mean, you're saying is if a large celestial body out here somewhere was pulling the electrodes were moving, and it pulled the hydrogen out of the water, then the water becomes flammable, comes ignitable, and
Right. That's right.
that's insanity, Mike. That's
Right.
crazy.
If you ignite, if you electrify and induce electrons into water, H2O, you're going to have a separation of oxygen and hydrogen. Well, the hydrogen is going to evaporate, right?
Yep.
Now, if the atmosphere is full of static, which it will be, it will ignite. Now, it is funny because this same process takes place every day through certain fuel cells that they have, right? It's the same exact process. The only difference is they control the amount of electrons, or they electrify that water in a specific way and then capture that hydrogen to use it as something else, separating it. But it's a known fact that has happened in sporadic places all over the earth in thunderstorms. That is a fact, because people have seen these. In a lot of cases, when people see strange lights above the water, right?
Yeah.
That is ignitable. That's a very low amount of hydrogen mixed with some other chemicals that come from decaying plants and things like that. And then it causes this chemical reaction, which causes a glow. And so, but the static discharge that we're having it will no doubt abruptly increase, right?
Is that what CERN is concerned about, this wave? So this third wave that's coming, Mike, is it stronger than these first two?
Yeah, yes, much. The first one, August 15th, the first one that came through, right?
Right.
It started the chemical fires on the same day. Let's call that coincidence. They started going off all over the place.
There, folks, what he's talking about.
Exact same day, during the exact same time, right?
You were right. You said, and for those of you who are new, 3 years ago, when the first wave came through on August the 17th, Mike said to me, when this wave goes through, chemicals will start exploding. Folks, that day, there was 4 different chemical factories in the planet that exploded, literally exploded. And this went on for a few weeks. China, you are so right. You told us. So that's what you're saying. Keep going. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Okay, so now this one, however, right, because you're looking at high-speed particles coming through, which can literally knock the nucleus out of any type of material, right? It can also damage the human cells. The cells in your body can be damaged, specifically brain cells can often be damaged by high-speed particles. So that is not good. That's just not good. And so you're looking at these changes, but the most damaging would be the oceans. We're going to have a bad problem with the oceans. A very bad problem.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What kind of a bad problem?
Well, right now, the Earth is somewhat balanced as far as clouds keep balance to the Earth and the wind patterns and everything else. Clouds are responsible for fresh water. Salt water, not so much, right? But as these particles come in, we're going to have a formation of more and more aerosols, which means more and more cloud formations, which means high retention of water in the atmosphere. But it's the wrong type of particle coming in. Most protons that come slamming into the atmosphere, they're somewhat passive. But when you begin to see auroras all over the place, that means we're being inundated. That means it overwhelmed our magnetic shield, is what that really means. Now, as it changes colors, and it gets to a reddish, bluish type color, right? Because you have red, then you have green, then you have purple, then you have red again, green and purple. And when it starts turning to a bluish type color, we've got the ignition of the wrong type of gases going off in the atmosphere. When that takes place, the moisture is going to do something near a flash fire. Let's put it that way. A flash fire, which will totally make dry the atmosphere, but it will also cause wind speeds to greatly increase because you're having too much of a difference between hot and cold, right? Kind of like that fire in California.
Yeah.
Without that fire, it would not drive those winds the way it is. But when you introduce heat, where there's any type of cold front or medium grade air and some pretty decent temperatures, you're going to have higher winds, right? So if you do that in the atmosphere, where are the winds going to go? They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to go underneath the clouds, straight to the surface of the earth, but it's going to cause a circulation problem, right?
Well,
faster and faster circulation.
but if I'm right, you're saying the jet streams come down level with the earth, and then they're going to be flying at a high speed. They're not going to be up there. They're going to be down here. Am I right?
Yeah, they're not going to be flying. If it gets that high, there's no way aircraft are going to be able to fly. Things will be grounded. Certainly the average aircraft, they won't have enough airspeed to take off unless you take off 400 miles an hour. Anyway, we're looking at those type scenarios. This term that I coined, atmospheric compression, right?
Right.
A person cannot go look that up and find that anywhere. That was my term I coined, and a small group of individuals. And what that means is the density that is up in the ionosphere is becoming very thick. Now, right now, you could wave your hand through the ionosphere and feel no heat because there's not a lot of atoms up there, right? But as particles come in, they keep coming in. You know, it's you can get up to 11,000 degrees up there. That's the potential heat that could be up there if the density continues to increase, which means every year following this influx of particles, that could actually begin to heat up drastically, just like Venus is doing now, just like Mars is doing now, just like these other planets are doing now. All of them are heating up, and Earth is next. It came from the outside going to the inside.
Now, Mike, let me read something for you and for the audience here. This is from the Popol Vuh, which is a sacred book of the Mayan Indians. They wrote this during the time of the plagues of Egypt. They wrote, "It was ruin and destruction. The sea was piled up. It was great indentation. People were drowned in a sticky substance, raining from the sky. The face of the earth grew dark, and the gloomy rain endured days and nights. And then there was a great din of fire above our heads. The entire population of the land was annihilated." Now, that was written by the Mayans in an ancient text they left. Now, I want to read one more thing, and then we're going to get your feedback. In the book of Exodus, this is what was happening the same time that the Mayans wrote that. And it's in Exodus chapter 9, verse 23. It says, "And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground. And the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with the hail, very grievous, such as there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail smote every herb of the field, and brake every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail." Now, I also know that, and I'm not going to read this other information I have, but 4 other populations in 4 different areas of the world, and written also in text, one of them just oral legend, all spoke of similar things. Now, David Wilkerson in 1973 prophesied 41 things he saw in the end of time. 40 of those things he saw has come to pass. There's only one that hasn't. He said, "I saw the cosmos on fire." So, Mike, after reading what the Mayans saw, are you saying that this is a similar manifestation that's coming on the earth from these waves of energy?
It very well could be. It really could be, and it's not, because the emphasis. I'm not familiar with that Popol Vuh, what you just read. I'm familiar with the name the Mayans. I think all of us are, from 2012, but not the details of what they were into. But I can certainly see the realization of the inferno in the sky, or flash burn. I'm going to call it a flash burn.
All right.
So if you had diesel fuel, right, and you took a match and put it inside the diesel fuel, right, you just dropped it in there, what would happen?
It would probably just go out. It would go out.
Yeah. It would go out because the temperature is not high enough. So let me ask you this. If volcanoes were going off, right?
Yeah.
And if the atmosphere was dry, and if we started having meteor storms, not meteor showers, not the passive things, right? Like Illinois' meteor showers. And no, we're talking about penetration. If that were to happen, even on a small scale, with dry temperatures, what we would have is an ignitable atmosphere. If this particle count keeps going up, is what we would have. So a layer of the atmosphere would do something similar to a flash burn.
Yeah.
Now that flash burn would zip across the sky, but then we have another problem, because in the presence of that type of heat, you have chemical reactions and the release of chemicals, right? Both in the heavens and on the earth.
Yes.
And so there's no escape. And then we've messed ourselves up by digging for gas, right?
We have, haven't we?
Oil,
Oh,
right?
no.
So
Oh, no.
you're going to have oil, which under heat, those pressure valves are going to start changing. You know, they constantly have to redo pressure valves on oil refineries and gas systems and everything else. So what happens if the pressure changes in the atmosphere? Then everything that relies upon that Hg element, it's not going to work right. Right?
No, that's
it's
right.
going to go bonkers, and then we're going to have a real problem. Because if all that stuff starts releasing, that one explosion in the United States near Texas of one of those gas vats could actually cause the ignition, right? Ignition of faults, I believe that the Navy calls it. An ignition of faults from Texas all the way up to Alaska, and Texas all the way up through New York.
What?
And if that were to take place, indeed, we're just, you know, that's an absolute problem. But it's something they raised to the with the United States in 1988, and no one did anything about it.
So this is a real situation that we've created our own mess here without maybe understanding it was maybe because we didn't believe. I mean, you had Jeremiah Stitchin, and you had some of these other guys that were, you know, the ancients wrote about Nibiru. And I mean, I'm sitting there reading from a sacred text of the Mayans, and I've also read some from the Egyptians and others, and they all talk about this effect from the Bible that we just read from. And if they say it's coming again. Now, you know, if you read in 2 Peter chapter 3, even the Apostle Peter said the earth is going to melt with a fervent heat. Even the elements are going to burn up. So we shouldn't be shocked. I mean, this is really prophecy. So, Mike, what you're saying is, what is this third wave? I guess I'm asking is, what will this third wave bring? Is it going to bring a lot of heat lightning? Is it going to bring some, are we going to see some fires? Are we going to see some factories exploding? What's going to happen here?
Well, this drought that we're enduring, remember a long time ago I said we're going to have floods and droughts at the same time?
Yeah, I remember.
And the rains would come, but the drought would endure. Okay,
yes.
It's going to get worse is what's going to happen, because when this particle count increases, it's going to give everybody a good light show in the sky, right? They'll see beautiful cloud colors. What they won't know is the reason for this. As that particle count increases, there is I said this one time on your show. I'm very hesitant to say it again, but I said it was a lot of miles wide. And we're not talking about one rock. It is not one rock. It's a bunch of things. Well, guess what? It's still coming. And at some point in the near future, right? Like maybe a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years, we're going to see the beginnings of that. Right?
What?
So these, every time, if you notice, with every time, these, I gave you the wave dates and what was, you know, from these computer models. Now, a lot of data was missing from these things, but the more we go through this, the more time that goes on, the more data can be collected, the more precise the next one can be. Okay,
all right.
Because it's very hard to model things without experimentation and computer modeling. So even with the optical count of the particles coming in right now, right, the simulations are saying something totally different than what most people ever thought. So watch this. You're going to see it push. You're going to see it push from all governments. They're going to have to collect money fast. You're also going to see new drills take place. Now, if you watch where any drills take place in the U.S., mark the locations. That's all you have to do is
What
mark
kind
the
of drills
locations.
are we talking? Are you talking about military?
Well, you remember
Military?
Jade Helm? You guys remember Jade Helm? When
Yeah.
Jade Helm took place, and normally when something like that happens, I'm not going to speak about it because there's too many people speaking about it, and anything that you do say during that time is going to get lost in the water. Okay.
Okay.
So it's good for me to back off and wait till things pass, so that with some sobriety, some good points come. Not that anybody is wrong. It was just too many different perspectives on Jade Helm. And so if I would have said something back then, it would have drowned out. It would have been drowned out with what everybody else was saying. But if you look at the locations of Jade Helm, they correlate with something. If you look at the locations of certain strategic moves, they correlate with something. And what we're seeing here is a preparation. Even if the Christians, and I certainly hope they do, I know they find it hard to believe, because you just said that, for a long time, they didn't believe some of the texts that they were getting, and people would try to tell them it's because we had no context. We also couldn't believe that technology or a situation like that could exist. But right now it's come to us to see volcanism, earthquakes, and all these other things. So with context, we can understand more and more. We can put it into our minds and say, okay, that's plausible or possible. With all these operations taking place all over the earth, their locations mean everything. It means everything. It's not so much what's going on. It is who's doing it and where it's taking place at. Because if the story is true, now I'm talking about what everybody else says, and the elitists, as people call them, are truly concerned about things, then wouldn't they set up rapid deployment of protected individuals into safe zones? When they set that up, a rapid deployment of these high-profile individuals to safe zones, right? When they have that in place, which means they would have to take the public, move them away from certain areas, and get the important people where they need to be.
So,
correct?
Mike, when we talk about a safe zone, if you're going to talk about fire and flammable water and the sky igniting and that kind of thing, and factories blowing up, you got to be then the safe zone would have to be underground. And I take it that that's part of the building of these underground tunnels, underground cities. So if we start seeing high-profile individuals being moved into safe zones, they'll do it quietly, but is it underground? Is that what we're talking?
Well, they would have to be underground. They would also have to be pressurized. But here's the deal, though. How would you get them there? You can't get them there through the chaos. You wouldn't have control on the streets like that. You wouldn't do that. And so the best time to move them, about 6 years ago, I do believe it was, Pascal uttered this one thing. I said, if people begin to see important just good thinkers in our country, right? The smart people who, by their thoughts, things had a formation in this country. But if you start seeing them disappear, the people that really matter, not so much your spokesman, but I'm talking about people who really matter. The day you stop seeing them, the day you stop seeing individuals who have a real grasp on things, right? They're going to be replaced with. Now, this was a long time ago, but popular figures. They do cause the public to engage with them, right?
Right.
They do. And everybody's used to reality television. So then when they see drama, it's more plausible. They can believe in it. They won't see it as, just drama. And it's not that they're trying to do this, right? They know who they're selecting. They also know who must come out of the picture, like all the dead scientists and all the dead bankers and all the dead microbiologists and all these guys. They're not all dead. How can they be all dead? They're not all dead. So if you had the brightest minds in America and you needed to protect them, one key thing is that you would have to have them relocate at least 8 years prior to any event. They wouldn't just go down there at the last minute. They wouldn't do that. But they would go out of the public side. And I said that when you no longer see them, recent pictures of them, video of them walking in the sun, right? Then they're somewhere else. If all you see is a person talking in a room, right? Never in the sun, never in the public anymore, then something's not right. And they have invested more than $700 billion, right, in newscasting to make the backgrounds look real.
Yeah, they have.
$700 billion in 2 years. That's outrageous.
Well,
we're talking about purchasing We're talking about R&D. What's a news broadcasting company doing with an R&D asset that is worth, you wouldn't believe how much they're worth. But they're working really hard so that no one suspects anything. Why? Because the populace would pose a problem for the entire system if that were to happen.
So in other words, they're going to do this stealthily. They're going to slowly put the top scientists, the brightest minds, the most important people in their mind that need to be to be safe. But they're going to camouflage it in plain sight by.
They would have already had to begun.
And it's already begun. It's already begun. So, Mike, now that we're going to, so in other words, we know it's begun. We know it's begun. So now that we can see that happening in a camouflage world, and we know these waves are coming, and we're going to see effects of those, and they're going to intensify and get worse as we go forward. More straight line winds, more chargeable lightning strikes, more typhoons, more monsoons that are dangerous. I mean, everything's going to intensify. People ought to be realizing that just like the Bible said, the wormwood effect is real. This planet is going to endure it, and people need to get their lives right with God, don't they?
They do. They do, Pastor Paul. You know what? There's another sad fact. I'm not going to be in this camp. Jesus continually said that he was speaking about the world. Now, I know people liken this to the giants and everything, right? Which is a whole different conversation. But he said that the end days would be like the days of Noah. But he also said there'd be eating, drinking, marrying, giving into marriage until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then he said, they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. They knew nothing until the flood came.
Yeah, that's what it says. They didn't know.
They didn't know a thing. And so, but how can you not know anything with all these things going around? Here it is. You ready for this? Everybody is looking for the big earthquake, correct?
Right.
Right?
Right.
But look at this year's stats. If you look at this year's stats, we've had a 10.0 earthquake every single month. Every single month. The same damage by these small earthquakes is I'd say every 2 months. That same damage equates to the same thing. So what we see is a buildup in the entire earth shaking on a continuous basis.
But Mike, whoa, you're saying we've had a 10.1. The meters don't say that. The U.S. Geological Survey doesn't say that. Are you saying they're adjusting the scale?
No, what I'm saying is, listen, here it is. All these small earthquakes, I'm going to give people an alternative way to see something. Maybe they didn't see it this way before. Pastor Paul, say if we have 4.0s, 6.0s, 5s, in various places. But what's happening is this crumbling structures and foundations and infrastructure and everything else. And what I'm saying is, on a daily basis with these earthquakes, right, it really does equate to at least a big one every 2 months, a 10.0. The same damage incurred, right?
Yeah.
That same damage, the earth is constantly shaking, and the frequency of these earthquakes is trending upward off the scale. The trending of volcanism, volcanism always started at the seafloor. Well, the average person can't see that, right? It is a dangerous place under the waters, and it's outrageous. And so now it's trickling upward to everything else. Even New York City, they're going to have a conference soon about New York City. They've got a problem in New York City. In fact, it's not only New York. It's New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Virginia. Right there under the Appalachians, we're looking at a large instability in there. They're going to have a conference soon because they've got to get together and find out what in the world they're going to do to get people to have some kind of plan in place, because they may have a real lava problem.
A what? A real lava problem?
Yes, Pastor Paul. You know what? They try to ease out a few articles, right? And they try to say, well, we found a lot of lava underneath New York, but it wouldn't do anything for 10 billion years. Well, isn't that kind of like the 1,000-year storms that we get every 2 weeks in the summer or something like that, right? A 1,000-year storm, but we get a couple every,
Yeah.
We get a couple of those storms a month, but they're only supposed to hit every 1,000 years. And so what they're doing is playing games on what they're finding. And there is a tight clamp on findings these days. But they're about to throw everything away, because I give you this hint. If and I know you've heard it, but these visitations of heads of state, right?
Right.
If all that has any type of validity, then we're on a clock that's really ticking down. Okay, because number one, even by way of the Bible, man does not control prophecy, right? The Christians do.
Right.
It's based on what the Christians are falling for. And you know what I see more and more is a lot of the Christian community we've lost the type, well, you still have it, but many don't have that fire anymore. It's a fire in them. Prophecy drew them to this, knowing these things were going to happen, but something is taking place where everybody wants everything to be normal, right? Like they're wearied or something like that.
Right.
And but we have a problem because if there's validity to that, you're going to have to see a change. Now, this is a weird statement, but there will have to be a change in government within the next 12 months. I mean, the whole thing. Something must break it down. Something's going to have to break down government. Not so everybody can go hide either, but so that they can introduce what they have already set up, right? This new technological bank that they have, let's call it that, not a physical bank like you're trading money, but I'm talking about the management of individuals, right? Both for hazardous conditions, both for this huge drought that is absolutely forming, and I'm surprised nobody can see it. There's a dangerous drought forming. The fresh water is warming out. Saltwater intrusion is in the U.S. Half the lake life is mutated or dying within America. The bugs are changing, right? The Brazilian climate is going to be right up towards us, and then the Earth is flipping not by way of its axis, but by way of the weather. So then the poles are going to be sitting sideways, right?
Yeah, that's what Isaiah
chapter sitting sideways.
Isaiah chapter 24 says that, folks, in the very first verse. The earth's going to flip upside down. Basically, it's going to be in a pole shift and a constant pole shift. In other words, not just one big day where the whole world flips completely upside down, but a shifting. Mike, you're saying working its way till it's sideways, and it's going to affect the weather patterns drastically, and that's going to affect the ecosystem completely, and millions of people will die from all that. I mean, there's no way to adjust, isn't it, Mike?
Well, no, we're going to have to, some of the things we're enduring right now, we're going to have to endure that. Now, I have, me, I'll just walk right through it, whatever the Lord sends, so long as I have Christ in me, I'm okay. I can walk that way, but I'm taking everything more serious now than ever. And I think that everybody's going to learn that this winter, that the weather can be an enemy of man, and it can actually win, because you can't shoot the weather away. And then this, we're going to have the oceans are changing, folks. This winter, the atmosphere is holding too much moisture. And with the inundation of this radiation, then you're looking at the biological aspect of it. So expect some strange sicknesses, right, in the human body. Really, some strange sicknesses.
I better get a lot of silver.
We're going to find it difficult to overcome many things. And if you look at the truth of it, our children are affected. People's minds are greatly affected, which is one of the bigger things. Because there are a lot of folks who are going to start losing memory, and they won't know why, right?
Yeah.
As time endures, as time goes on, it's going to almost be like some people are trapped in some sort of a dream state, and that's due to magnetics. Now, there's a rational explanation for that.
Mike, I tell you what, this is a lot to absorb tonight. We know this wave is going to start inundating us this weekend. And over the next period of time, we're going to see more and more, as you say, I heard you say it last week, if we can just make it through the winter. There's going to be some drastic changes. We're going to watch it closely. But we're going to have to let you go, Mike. This hour has flown by. Like to get you, we're in a couple of weeks, going to bring you back in again if you're available.
Oh, I have a presentation for you, too. I'll send it to you, Pastor, so that you will have something to absolutely show everybody out there, so that they get the links and they can get the information and the particle count and everything else, so they can look at this themselves. And because it's turning from something we possibly could see in the far future to something we're going to have to go through.
Send it, yes.
At it now, so.
Send it to me, Mike, and that way I'll review it and I'll absorb it, and then I'll share it with the people, and we'll get them understanding. We'll bring you in to help us. I think it'll help us in a big way.
I'll make it as simple as possible, like I did the CERN presentation, and we'll take it from there.
Mike, thank you so much. We'll have you back in about 2 weeks. I will have absorbed your information, and we will get back and check what's going on. Obviously, as we enter into this winter, and we'll be in the middle of this third wave of energy, won't we?
Yes, we will.
Thank you, Mike. God bless. Thank you so much, and God bless you, my brother.
God bless you, Pastor Paul.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mike.